welcome back to Talkacardia. My name's Holly Godsey. I'm the host of this podcast. We bring up and talk about healthcare violence, healthcare issues, and just kind of advocate for the bettering of our entire profession. I am here with Jody Finn. He is a police officer here in the Valley, and he is here just to talk through some of the things that I think we experience, some of the terms that I feel are confused in our profession, and kind of just bridge the gap of that education deficit. So hopefully if and when, unfortunately, the next time a situation happens where a healthcare worker is assaulted, that it's not so fearful and being like, I don't know if this is a misdemeanor or a felony. I don't know what pressing charges means, just to hopefully set our people up for more success. So I'll let Jody introduce himself and kind of his history and work history that makes him qualified to have this conversation, and then we'll dive right into it.
Well, thank you for letting me be here, Holly. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
So I'm one of those guys that kind of did everything in life. I've worked in jails and whatnot. And 2019, when I was 46, I said, you know what? I'm going to go to a police academy.
Okay.
So at 46, I went through a police academy, hit the streets in 2020, January, which was an interesting time in becoming a police officer in 2020 because all of law enforcement kind of changed. It was, finished up to FTO and they're like, you're going to night shift and here's your first protest/riot.
Oh God.
Enjoy it.
And everyone's angry. That's like
everybody's
the year of confusion and anger.
Doesn't matter. This is what's interesting with police work. It's the only job I've ever had where everybody knows how to do it better than I do.
Oh.
And it's the only job I've ever had that nobody ever wants you around until they need you.
Yeah.
And then even when you do show up because they need you, they kind of want you to do it their way. Mm-hmm. Of all my careers, though, it is the most rewarding. Like I said, so 2020... got to do some cool stuff. 2021 got sent to a special task force that the department had created, which was kind of like finishing school for becoming a police officer. Worked with a lot of really good dudes. Got to do a lot of fun things. Worked with a lot of agencies in the Valley. Back to patrol in 2023. Detective certified. A lot of long-term temporary assignments with our detective units. Late 2023, my wife's business took off.
Yes.
And it was just more beneficial to help her with that. So actually went reserves. So full-time 2020 to late 2023, and now I'm a reserve officer. So I still have all my post certifications, still have all that comes with that, and still I do my shifts every couple of weeks, and it's good.
Awesome. So you have some experience with dealing with healthcare assaults.
I do, actually.
Okay.
We had quasi-hospital in the sense that it was a juvenile mental health facility, behavioral health facility, which when you read the statutes, like they still kind of fall under that.
Yeah.
And then we would help other zones or precincts. And so got to answer a couple of calls at some bigger hospitals near us. And yeah, I was always, this is what I like to say, is I didn't write the book. I just read the book.
Okay.
And so when it comes to like how we charge for assaults on healthcare workers, I didn't make it that level of charging. Yeah. I just read that it was that level. Yeah.
Okay. So going to the beginning.
Okay.
Let's just familiarize our listeners with what filing charges looks like, what that means, who actually does that. So we'll talk through kind of a scenario. Okay. Say I'm at work. I work in the ER, and I get punched or shoved, and I call the police because I want to press charges or file charges, which I still to this day don't really understand what that means. And I'm sure a lot of my listeners don't understand what that means. So talk me through, like, if you were the officer dispatched to a nurse that was hurt at work, what does that look like? What do you do? What do you think? What are you planning?
So the most important part is the nurse has been assaulted, right? Mm-hmm. So depending on the agency where your hospital is, the time frame in which you make that phone call, you as the victim, if you're able, go get a desk phone and call 911, right? I know our dispatch people have like parameters, and don't take this for gospel, but basically, if the assault happened within 5 minutes of you calling and that person's there, they're going to make that a priority one call. What that means is whatever else you're doing, if you're available, you're going to go. This is kind of serious.
Okay.
And we get kind of updates. Like, think like lights and sirens.
Yeah.
If it doesn't meet that parameter, for us, it would fall into what's called a priority 2. So a crime occurred. We need to get somebody there. Next available person, if it's your area, because police are assigned like beats or zones where if something happens in that area, you go. If you have a good shift, though, if it's not in your area, but you're available, you're going to go because that's going to get returned to you. So then you're going to show up and not lights and sirens. If it's like next day or hours later, that might be a priority 3. And that's like, I'm going to get every cat out of a tree first.
Okay. So that's like if a nurse, this happened to them and we have, I mean, I'm sure policies differ in different facilities, but sometimes they're like, okay, report this happening within 24 hours of the incident.
Right.
That would be more like, okay, the patient's not there. The nurse might not even be there.
But you still want to report.
Up. Yeah.
Yeah. You still want to report. So
okay.
Eventually somebody will show up.
Okay.
The key part though is you assessing, right? Because if you read the statute, ARS 13-1203, there's like your simple assaults. And I don't mean to use this kind of the legal term, like your basic assault. Like in there is like unwanted touching.
Okay.
So an assault, according to that statute, doesn't have to be you got smacked in the face. It can be I got shoved, or I got poked, or
groped.
Groped. Now you're getting into some other stuff that could happen, some other laws that would have to be looked at.
Okay.
But keeping it to like the simple assault, like you got pushed, you got shouldered. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this huge act of violence according to the statute.
Oh, okay.
So really read that 1203 or any conduct which would provoke you can be considered assault as well. So that happens. So depending on when that happens, when you call, going to show up. First thing I'm going to do is going to find you.
Yep.
Here's what's important. So you've called us because you're alleging a crime has occurred that you're a victim of. We would say, like, you're a victim of a crime. Like, where is she? Well, she's going and seeing her other patients. Okay. I mean, this probably fall on your admin side of like, hey, this person got assaulted. Let's put them in timeout. Let's sit them down somewhere.
Yeah. Give them a sec.
Exactly. So then going to show up, and the first thing I do obviously would introduce myself, get your information so that I can positively identify you, because that's a huge thing in our reports.
And what information are you going to ask for? Name,
date of birth. If you have a
birthday.
driver's license, driver's license is perfect. And then I'm going to say, is this your current address? Yes. What's a good contact number? What's a good email?
Now, I have had some nurses concerned with giving out their private information. Is it a problem if nurses want to give like the hospital address?
Yeah. So I can understand that. Like when assaults occur on police officers and we give our information, like we're listing headquarters.
Yeah.
We're listing that. We're listing the main line.
Because people don't want that to be like public record, and then these people track them down to their house and their families.
Understand. And that's you, depending on the officer, because it's like nursing, right? It depends on what nurse you get as kind of your level of care.
Yeah.
So if an officer, I don't think they would, but in the case they did kind of push back, you would say, hey, what if this was you? Would you put your address? And hopefully
they'd probably be like, hell no.
And hopefully that clicks, right? That they're like, okay, so give them the hospital address, give them the main line.
So we are able to do that.
Yeah, you can do that. It's just, you can ask for that to be done. I mean, me as an officer, that's totally reasonable. I'm already going to kind of assume that.
Okay.
But it just depends on the officer you get. You might have to explain that a little more or be a little more.
Like, no, I'm not comfortable.
Yeah, here's really the reason why I want that, you know? And again, that example of like, what would you put? Yeah. So we've identified you. I'm going to ask for your story. Well, I'll take it back. It's like, where's my suspect? And if you're like, well, he's in his room, restrained and medicated.
Then you're like, God, I can't talk to him.
Okay, I'm going to give that a second, right? So then I'm going to get your story. You're going to tell me what happened. And then as you tell me what happened, this is the first thing I'm going to ask you is, do you want to aid in prosecution?
What does that mean? That
means you're willing to go to court. You're willing to testify as to what happened. And you're willing to say, yes, I wasn't a victim of this alleged crime. Because remember, it's still alleged until there's a court determination of this alleged crime.
Okay.
You saying yes, you want to aid in prosecution is a huge thing.
Like, I will take this as far as it needs to go.
Yeah, they grab my hand and let's walk through this. Here we go. So you can have a crime and you can have a victim who doesn't desire to aid in prosecution. It still doesn't mean you don't have a crime. You know what I mean? It's just you don't have somebody who's willing to aid in the prosecution of that crime. My next thing I'm going to ask you is, can you positively identify the person that you're saying did this?
Okay.
And you're like, yep, I can. Cool. And then I'm going to ask your story. And I'm going to just let you talk and write it down. And then my next thing is going to be, okay, it's a hospital. Do we have any video camera? Do we have any video footage that I can ask for? Or at least put in my report, Nurse Holly stated this occurred in this hallway that has a video camera. That video can be requested from the hospital. Then for us, for assaults, regardless of the level, and I tend to do this with anybody alleging assault, I'm going to say, okay, wait here a second. I'm going to go to my car. I'm going to get my camera. And I'm going to come back and document you as you are now, as you are immediately after the incident.
So is that just of any injury, or do you just take a picture of the face?
Really, I'm going to take a picture of as you stand this way, as you turn, and then I'm going to ask you specifically, where were you injured?
Okay. And
then I'm going to take photos of that was documented. Now, if you're really good and you have a really good cop, what they're going to do is they're going to contact you like a day or two later and be like, hey, can I come and take follow-up photos? Because we know how bruising happens, right? Something could not look like a bruise today.
Yeah.
But then in 2 days, you're like bruised up.
Yeah.
So a really good officer if they're on, or they might even contact somebody like, hey, would you do this for me? Or you making a phone call and saying, hey, can I have that officer out? Can I have an officer out for photographing these injuries from the other day?
Okay.
That means a lot.
I didn't even know that was a thing. That's great.
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
I mean,
you almost have to advocate for yourself at this point. But I think that part of this deficit is that we aren't taught this process or this side of things. So nurses think pressing charges, that's just the end of it. Oh, someone will reach out or someone won't. But I didn't even think to ask, oh, this bruise got worse. I'd like to get this documented.
Sure.
I wouldn't. And I've been in the healthcare field for 11 years now. I wouldn't have even thought to have someone else come back out.
Sure. And then you talked about pressing charges. The rookie, Criminal Minds, Law and Order, SVU have done as much for law enforcement as like Grey's Anatomy has done for like doctors and nursing. Yes. So in Arizona, you as the victim don't press charges.
Okay.
I as the responding officer don't press charges. It will be the county attorney's office or the city attorney's office, depending on where it finally ends up. They press charges. They're the ones. So you tell me what you had happened. I find what would be the applicable charge. If I find that there's probable cause to have believed a crime occurred,
okay,
then I submit those charges, and then it's the attorneys that end up pressing charges.
Okay.
Which is kind of, because a lot of people are like, I'm going to press charges.
Yeah, you're like,
well, you got a law degree? Like, you got hired by the county? Like,
yeah.
No, you're going to be the victim in this and tell me what happened for me to find the appropriate charge. And
you put it on paper and send it to the people that can do something about it.
Yep.
Okay.
And then, so now we get back to like our suspect. Well, I'm going to ask for witnesses, right?
Yep.
So with witnesses, it is always good to speak to them independently.
Okay.
It's always good to, if you're like, well, Becky, Tammy, and Bobby saw this. Okay. Are they available? Mm-hmm. Well, Becky is. So I'm going to take Becky. I'm going to sit down with her and I'm going to, what did you see happen? Because right now, and I think it's good for officers to remember, regardless of how this ends up, if you read the statute, if you read 1204, I want to say it's paragraph 8, it's in there. It talks about officers first, and then it talks about, and 1204 goes about aggravated assault. And then it's going to talk about like attorneys and stuff like that. And then you get to healthcare workers. Right now, we're talking a felony.
Okay.
It's a felony charge because the first part of 1204 basically says anything that happens in 1203, the simple assault, is now over here. And this is kind of the charging for it.
Who it happened to.
Because of who it happened to.
Okay.
So I think sometimes we lose track of that because we're like, okay, this isn't going to go we as officers would be like, this isn't going to go anywhere. nothing's going to happen with this. Like, but no. So right now it's a felony. So we need to process it like a felony. So once I get done with that interview, another interview, asking for contact information, stuff like this, asking the witness, like, hey, if this went to court, would you go testify on her behalf? That I can put that in my report, like, hey, not only did Becky see it, but Becky said she'd be willing to testify to it.
Okay.
And then, like I said, noting video. And then once I have that, I go to my suspect. First thing I'm going to do with my suspect, if they're aware, like if they're awake. Like there's been times where I've responded where that person is completely, they've flown on the B-52 and they haven't landed yet, that I would put like, not asking any questions because they were unable to respond. So no questions were asked, right?
Okay.
So now we get to what are we doing about it? Most likely with those cases, and a lot of officers, what they're going to do is they're going to contact their supervisor to be like, here's what I have. This was assaulted. And I've had to explain that charge to supervisors. Like, here's the charge. Like, here's what it says.
It can be defined under this level.
It meets this level. And I remember a conversation where they're like, well, but they're going to do this with it. I'm like, okay, but that's them. Right now, this is what I have.
Yeah.
I have this. And they're like, okay, and my suspect's identified, right? And I can identify them one of two ways. Either the nursing staff can tell me who they are, or we have something called a Digi1 roll where I can take your fingerprint and find out who you are.
And
right?
identify them. Okay.
Because I know like HIPAA is a huge thing, right? So I sent you, we looked over the Health and Human Services regarding HIPAA and when it comes to crimes, right?
Yeah.
So what was your take as a nurse from it?
I think it's even more confusing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I feel that you're taught you can't talk about patients, you can't identify patients. And so that can be part of this education deficit of, am I even allowed to do this? Because I feel like we're not necessarily encouraged to do so. And then people throw, oh, HIPAA, I can't talk about it, which is part of kind of the backbone of this podcast is, yes, we can talk about it. You just can't call them out by name.
Yeah. And so what that Health and Human Services guidelines for HIPAA in law enforcement, as I read it, and I guess your audience can Google it and find that same document.
I can put the link.
Is it's saying like, yeah, you can't identify like why they're here in the hospital. I mean, because if you think about it, how many hospitals you've worked in have cameras?
All of them.
Okay, is that not, if we go with traditional HIPAA, is that not a HIPAA violation? Because we're recording who's there, we're recording who's moving around.
Events,
the fact that they're that they're in the hospital.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to call a cab for anybody? Mm-hmm. When you call the cab, do you have to give them any information? Like who it's for?
Identifiers and that they were discharged.
But you're still identifying that person, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when we come in with a crime, our body camera is going to be rolling. Mm-hmm. We're going to have our body cameras on. Here's my thought on it. Hopefully somebody in your audience is a better cop than I was or am, or a better attorney than I am, is we talk about constitutional rights. And if you look at, so in Arizona, it's called Arizona Revised Statutes, ARS. Criminal laws, Title 13, okay? So we look at all those laws, but where do we kind of like, where do we find their foundations and their roots, right? Sometimes I think when we think of like the Bill of Rights, we usually think on how the state can violate your Bill of Rights. That like I, as a police officer, violated your Fourth Amendment when I just walked into your house and, and didn't have any reason to, which would be accurate, right?
Yeah.
But in that sense as well is the Fourth Amendment is, it's your right to be secure in your papers, property, and person. But just paraphrasing, right? So by necessity, an assault would be a violation of that Fourth Amendment right by another person, right? And now we've fine-tuned it to ARS, right? Mm-hmm. To our Arizona's Revised Statutes. We've fine-tuned that, but that's ultimately what we're kind of talking about if we reached way out for it. So rights. So HIPAA, you have a right. You have a right for your privacy. That is a right. Then I would ask you, do your rights ever end? Is there a point where your rights end? What do you think?
Well, I know the answer because we talked about it.
Okay, fair enough.
But at work, when my rights are violated, my prioritization of protecting this patient can end for the fact that I can press charges or get other people involved because my rights were violated as a worker.
So right. And so your rights end when somebody else's begins.
Okay.
So First Amendment, the freedom of speech, right? You can go out and protest.
Mm-hmm.
You can go out and be loud. You can walk on public sidewalks and you can say what you want to say. You can do what you want to, not do what you want to do, but you can get out there and you can have a sign. You can be mad at whatever in the world.
Yeah.
And you have that right. As soon as you step on my property, though, your right to protest kind of ends because my Fourth Amendment right to my property to be secure in it begins.
Okay.
So maybe contacting through whatever hospital or organizations for nurses that there might be is talking to a lawyer going, so HIPAA, we know HIPAA is a thing. Now the officer's coming in and the officer's not asking me, well, why did they come in? What was their latest lab draw? What's their A1C?
Mm-hmm.
What
alcohol level?
Yeah. What does any of that look like? What I need to know is who is this person?
Yeah.
Because once we identify people, who knows where it goes? I mean, you'd be surprised the amount of people that have warrants that just, there's more times than not, somebody would call me to their house because they were mad about something that ultimately was kind of petty. And I'd be like, okay, can I please have your name or driver's license? And they give it to me and I go to my car and our little computers do this deet, 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 deet. And then our dispatchers are calling us going, so-and-so unit, yeah, roll me another car because this person has a warrant for their arrest.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? So like they might have a warrant. There's the reasons why we want to identify that person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're going to, if you've called us, we are going to identify them. I think an important process in all of this, because nurses are close to my heart because my wife is a nurse.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
so
she's amazing.
I like her. I like her. Plus she's my boss. So
yes.
I'd like her twice as much. You called us, there's a crime. And as we're going through this process, do you remember when I said, hey, you've got to give your on-call admin a call to let them know you're doing this? Did I say that at all?
I don't remember.
I don't think I did. Or you need to get a hold of HR and go, hey, just so you know, we have the cops coming. Because as an officer showing up, here's what I care about. I care about who's my victim, mm-hmm. who's my suspect, who are my witnesses. Those people, where are they at? What are they doing right now?
Yeah.
As I'm conducting that investigation, if an admin person were to come and going, hey, what's going on? A police investigation. Well, I'm so-and-so. Good for you. Because you're not a victim. You're not a suspect. And I'll ask them, like, were you a witness to this? No. Okay, I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Because so take this same scenario and put it into McDonald's, right? That you're sitting there, you're enjoying your Happy Meal, and some rando comes up and pushes you or slaps you. Like everything I'm telling you is kind of the same.
Yeah.
You're not asking the manager if it's okay to call the police, right?
Yeah.
No, you're the victim of a crime.
You have the right to do so, no matter where you are.
You call us, right? And this is where you want to get careful because there is a statute regarding like prohibiting somebody from using a device to contact emergency services. Usually that's kind of like in the sense of like they took your cell phone away from you or something like that. Like somebody telling you no, you're not allowed to call 911. I probably could find a charge there because you're hampering a victim from getting what and services needs.
Yeah.
What's due to them, for lack of better words. So then, getting back, police work, nursing, I think ADD is a common thing in all of it. So I apologize for getting off track there.
That's okay.
Getting back. So depending on the state of my suspect is what I'm going to do. Right. So
like sedated or awake and
or they're still, or they're about to go to the OR. Right.
Okay.
So with that is I'm going to call my boss just to run it by him going, hey, they're out. Like they're out. Then what I'm going to do is he's going to say, all right, so we can't take him today. We're going to submit those charges. And how I submit those charges is I go back to you And once again, all right, so you can identify this person. This is just me. You can identify this person. Yes. You're willing to aid in prosecution. Yes. Then I'm going to give you a victim's rights pamphlet. Mm-hmm. And on the front of it, I'll have my name, my badge number, my boss's name, the type of call it was, and I'm going to give that to you. Oh, and the report number, because every call for service is just that. It's a call for service. It has a number attached to it.
Okay.
And I'm going to give that to you. And inside, I'm going to tell you, like, here's how you would file an injunction against harassment against this person. Have you ever heard of that? Have you ever heard order of protection?
Yes. Like a restraining order?
Sure.
Okay.
Injunction against harassment is basically the same thing, except you don't have that same connection in the sense of they weren't a family member. You weren't ever like
there's no relationship.
Roommates. Right. But so you can file an injunction against harassment. And if I'm doing my job right, I'm going to show that part to you. Like, here's the steps on how it's done, if that was something you chose to do. And then that incident report number and pointing out where you're going to want to call for follow-up if you haven't heard anything. Like I think for my department, like assaults is a specific detailed detective unit and they get a ton of stuff. So there comes a point where it doesn't seem fair. And I was huge on this. Like, you have rights in the sense of, ARS doesn't have a charge for you left your car running in your driveway and someone took it. I'm not showing up to charge you for that, right?
Yeah.
And people go, well, you were just dumb. I would argue that was your property. You can do what you want with it. You didn't violate any laws, which was why I'm not citing you for anything. And having to tell people that all the time, like, it shouldn't be like this, but here's what's going on, in this sense of, like, make some phone calls, like follow up with them.
Yeah.
See how the case is going, see what's happened with the case.
So they can call that number and someone should be able to answer these questions on what step it's on. Like, okay,
Sure.
We sent this to either city court or
what they're doing with it, or we're still investigating it, or the case is. So depending on the agency, right?
Yeah.
Mine's kind of a bigger agency that has detective details for almost everything. A smaller agency, it might be that the responding officer is actually going to be what's called the case agent for it, meaning they're going to be the one that does the detective work on it. I mean, that's one of the cool things about smaller departments in that sense of, like, you respond to a call and there's a good chance that you'll end up like taking that all the way through, like having all of that experience. Where for us, it's I showed up, I wrote a good report, I took photos, I got everything I needed, and I wrote a heck of a report that I submitted, and then detectives looked at it, and then they went from there, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of depends, but everybody should have like a phone number to the police department.
Yeah.
And talk to somebody and go, here's my case number. Can I talk to somebody involved with it?
Say they don't get a pamphlet.
So
The city that it happened in, can they call like the non-emergent number and be directed where they need to go?
So sure, like you can call, like I feel like you can call the non-emergency number for almost anything.
Yeah.
Usually though, there's like an info line. You might have to do a little research yourself, but at the end of that contact with that officer, at the very least, you should be given something that has their name on it, their badge number, and the call for service number.
Okay.
If this is kind of wrapping up and you're going, man, they didn't take any photos, we didn't ask about witnesses. Yeah, I'm going to need that incident number, because it's that incident number that's going to help navigate afterwards.
Yeah.
As to what's going on, what's happening.
Can they look it up by any other means?
Well, yeah, like for us, I can go into our report system and I could throw your name in there
Okay.
and see what comes back.
Okay.
There's other ways to do it. It's just, I would highly recommend a nurse advocate, be an advocate.
So nurses know if this happens and a police officer is there, get an incident number.
At the very least, that should be what you're left with at the very least.
Okay.
The call for service
That's
number.
great to know.
That this is something that I use to follow up on.
Okay.
Then it's going to, the detectives are going to look at it. They'll send it over, because we're talking felony, so we're going to send it over to the county attorney's office, and then they're going to decide what they do with it.
Now, why does that go to the county attorney's office? Did they handle
felony.
more severe stuff?
It's because it's a felony.
Okay.
So your felony or your higher charges, right?
Okay.
Not always, but if you're sentenced to more than 365 days consecutively, you're going to go to prison. If you're sentenced to less than 365, you're going to go to county jail. So you have misdemeanors and you have felonies. The lower the felony, like class 1 would be first-degree murder. Class 6, they're 1 through 6. Class 6 would be like possession of drug paraphernalia.
Okay.
And then you get into misdemeanors. So class 1 misdemeanor would be assault. And with assault, depending on the case, I have the ability to cite in lieu of detention, meaning, hey, here's your court date. You're still under arrest. And I still treat it like an arrest. Reading them the Miranda rights, because it's an arrest, is I say, if you sign this to promise to appear on this date, I can release you and you can just show up to that court date at the court location. If they don't sign it, then they go straight to jail.
Okay.
And then you get there's some class 2 misdemeanors, class 3 misdemeanors that are.
And they just get less severe as they go.
So I never did anything less than 3. I want to say class 3 is the lowest we go in Arizona. I'd have to double check, or any of your lawyer people can comment on it. That I think class 3 misdemeanor is the lowest they go.
Okay.
And then from there, the courts, the attorneys decide what they're going to do with it, where it goes. Some things that really help, though, are a victim who desires to aid in prosecution, photographs, even especially a couple days later, attached to the case file, witnesses, all of that kind of helps, and a victim who's making phone calls.
Okay. So the louder you get, or the more questions you ask and the more you advocate for yourself.
This person's kind of serious.
Yeah.
They're kind of serious. Because, think about working with the detectives. You're calling somebody, and first of all, you get a bad report. And the detectives hate that. You get a bad report of well, what happened here? I don't understand this. And then they're having to repeat it by contacting the victim, doing that all over again, especially if they have heavy workload. If you can give them a good report. So it's like we talked about a little bit earlier, what nurse you get.
Yeah.
Is what officer do you get, right? I can think of a time as a fairly new officer. Me and my car partner, we went over to where some other officers were dealing with the domestic kind of thing, right? One of the guys had been on 16 years. Another guy was out of the academy with me, so we had 43 seconds and our first cup of coffee wasn't cold, time, right?
Yeah.
And they have a lady screaming and crying in the back of the car, and they have this guy, and he's got these scratch marks and everything. And we're like, hey, how can we help? Well, we haven't interviewed her yet. They're we kind of have her hooked up as the aggressor. For us to go do an interview, and I have to say that my partner at the time did a really great interview where she can't understand why she's in the back of the car. That they had worked together. She was kind of homeless. He offered to let her stay there. At some point, he was forcing her on the bed, had kind of had his hands around her throat. And you can look and see there's some red. And I remember going back to the more senior cop, and I go, hey, so run this through again for me, how we got here.
Yeah.
So he tells me, I'm like, okay. I go, so get to the part where we're arresting the victim. Run that down with me again.
Yeah. How is this right?
And you could tell that he had kind of had what had happened set, because I asked again, no, run this down to me that we get to the part where we're arresting the victim.
Yeah. Did you hear both sides of the story?
But just giving him the opportunity to stop for a second to go, why are we arresting the victim? And for me to go, for us to kind of fix that, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it's going to be the officer you get.
Okay.
A lot of it as well is, I go back, my wife was an ER nurse, so I go back to that. Whenever I've had to take her to the ER, first of all, we had to make sure which ER we were going to.
Yes.
That nobody was working there that she knew, or that she had never worked there. And then the second thing is, when she'd get in the room, my first thing, and I almost did it today, I almost showed up with hot Cheetos and a Monster, but I didn't.
Yeah, don't eat or drink.
I didn't. Is I would stand by the door. And she's like, what are you doing? As soon as I see the nurse, I'm going to stand right here. I'm going to do this.
Oh, God.
And she's like, just sit down. Sit down. So much as there's things that everybody's a professional, but they're people, there are things that can antagonize a nurse, right? Mm-hmm. There are things that you can do that, the infant shows up with a fever, and you ask how long they've had that fever, and they say a couple of days, and you ask how much baby Tylenol they gave them, and they say, well, none.
Oh, they didn't even take the temperature. They were just hot.
So with that said, with officers, there were still people. Mm-hmm. And I would like to right now bet money that every nurse that has an interaction with an officer that they are there seeing this for what it is and writing it up for the way it is. Me personally, I very much took to heart when it was told to us in the academy, when you respond to a call, what if that was your wife? Mm-hmm. How would you want the officer to deal with that?
Yeah.
Or if it was your uncle or your brother or your best friend, how would you want that officer to treat that person? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of the same. But I will give this, so like nursing, right? Where you can go from a motor vehicle accident where people are dying to an infant drowning to the lady who's in there because she hasn't had a bowel movement in a day. I feel like the loudest of those is kind of going to be the bowel movement lady. Mm-hmm. But every time you go in the room, what do you have to do? That's that patient, right? Mm-hmm. That's that person. I've had nights where we've worked a fatality at the beginning of the shift, wrestled a guy in an alleyway over the other officer's gun, to 3 o'clock in the morning. They want contact because somewhere out in their neighborhood, a dog is barking. They don't know where. They don't know how, but they want that taken care of. And sometimes it's hard. So sometimes it's hard for that. Your cortisol, you're dumping adrenaline from just kind of 10 o'clock at night till 3 in the morning to then deal with this dude who's like a dog somewhere. And then you pull their premise history and go, okay, like every night he calls and every night he doesn't know who it is. But when you interact with them, you have to treat that like the very first call of the night.
Yeah.
You have to treat it like it's the most important
call. Can't really use the history against them or hold anything against them.
That's, I mean, if you're the person like when I go to the hospital, I don't care what other people are there. I care about me. That's why I'm here. Yeah. That's why I care about is me. Mm-hmm. So what that's saying is when that officer gets there, like you really don't know where they're coming from or what they've done.
Yeah.
It's no right to be a jerk, mind you.
No.
But if they are short, if they are snappy, kind of adjust, right? You know, if that was like, hey, I'm trying to say this.
Well, you can remind them, be like, look, if this was you.
Going back to that.
How do you want
if this was
to be handled?
If this was you. My wife at an ER likes to talk about a patient who flicked blood on her purposely. Mm-hmm. Officer showed up and he's kind of like, so what do you want? And my wife goes, what would you do? How would you treat this if this was you?
Yeah.
And I think that got through to him.
Yeah.
So, and then that's where you're at is wherever the courts take it.
Okay.
I fear with officers though, because a lot of times our stuff gets removed from a felony down to a misdemeanor.
Yeah. Talk to me about that. How does that happen? Because I know from the nursing side of it, we're just like, oh, it's just false advertising that it can be a felony when everything just gets dropped or dismissed or dropped down to a misdemeanor. And like I said, we don't really know what these terms mean. We just feel like no one's taking our assault seriously.
So it is a felony because the statute says it's a felony. Something I ran into, and you would have to get, honestly, it'd be amazing to have a county attorney on here to explain that part of it, because I only see this side of it. Mm-hmm. Early on is I would stack charges. If there was a charge for it, like, oh, he had a dog and there was no leash, that's a city charge. Like,
as much as you could put on.
You know what I
there,
mean?
Yeah.
And what I come to find out is the experiences I had personally is those felonies were getting kicked out. The misdemeanors were becoming the case now.
So they could just kind of
because they were like, oh, we're going
to,
we don't want that one can go or that one can go. I mean, go get them for the misdemeanor charges. Now, even with the city court, I remember one time I told you we were doing the street racing stuff, had an arrest for that. It went to court. At the beginning of court, the city attorney told me there was a sticky note kind of on all these files that said dismiss. So I'm not sure if it was yours or not, but we're going to dismiss it. And I'm like, okay, so you're dismissing it on a sticky note that might not be for my case?
So you don't even know.
And she was like, well, yeah, but it was this attorney and I just got this stuff last week. I'm like, well, can we call him?
Yeah.
I don't have his number. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I was trying to be cool. So it gets dismissed and I ask her, I go, hey, and it was one page. It was just one page. And I go, when you read my report, like what could I have done better? Like
for you to take it seriously.
What could I have done better? And looked at her and I'm go, you did read my report, right? So yeah, everybody's human. Everybody's human.
I feel that kind of alongside that, nurses have this kind of common thing that we're kind of grouped into this category with police officers. Like we're just supposed to just take it. It's part of the job. We're supposed to just expect that we're going to get hit, bump, bruise, slap, because that's just part of our profession. Kind of like, I know you're not trained on it. It's not in nursing school. It's not in our orientation.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what block of instruction was that?
I mean, literally, it's kind of like you learn on the streets, you're just like, oh, well, I guess this isn't a thing. And unfortunately, so many nurses having poor experiences with it going nowhere is influencing our next generation of nurses to not press charges because, quote unquote, nothing ever happens. I mean, even with my guests that I had on a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that was wild. I watched that. That was wild.
It's just, we don't feel like it's getting taken seriously when nothing is ever prosecuted to the level that we are told we would be defended to.
So, and I think my argument to that is the legislature in Arizona who legislates, makes laws, they are saying it's a felony. So at the officer's level, yeah, I'll make that a felony. Like, cause I can read what the legislature wrote.
Yeah.
Goes back to, I didn't write the book. I just read the book.
Yeah.
And the book said it's a felony.
So this crime happened and this crime can be prosecuted per the book at this level. But
this is the charge.
Where's the fallout though? Why are these getting
the disconnect?
dropped?
It'd be great if you had a county attorney come in, because
I will try.
The legislature says it's a felony. The officer who reads the book goes, well, it's a felony. Then again, because I don't press charges, I submit that.
Yeah. To the courts to
the prosecutors.
Something.
And then they're going to press the charge. So without saying it, I think we've identified the disconnect.
Yeah. So what could nurses do to be taken more seriously? And again, I know this is not legal advice, but is it that we call more frequently, that we get our own legal representation to try to handle it? Like, what does that look like?
Nurses are really a powerful group. We kind of talked about this. Like, you all nearly burned down the View because of doctor stethoscopes.
Yes.
As I get on social media and as I look around and stuff, I don't see a lot of nurses as mad about being assaulted as they were about that stethoscope.
Yeah. I feel like we just always have something to say, and I don't want to come off as I'm constantly complaining about my profession because I truly love what I do. But I am to the point where I'm like brokenhearted that people don't want to even fill out papers or take things to court when they have every right to, because their rights were violated. Because quote unquote, or this whole impression is that nurses should just handle it. We should handle the patient that yells at us. We should handle the threats from these people. And we're not supported from the courts because it's dismissed. I mean, I think I gave you the analogy earlier. If a patient chooses to drink alcohol and drive a car, or a person, it doesn't have to be a patient, a person chooses to drink, they drive a car, they get pulled over, that can be prosecuted as a DUI. Normally I'm not like a stats person. I don't know the actual data on this, but I feel like you don't really hear about those getting dismissed or dropped down. But again, I could be wrong.
So DUIs, it's funny you picked that. Like, as a cop, that's like the worst.
That's what I've heard, is sometimes they don't even want to fill out the paperwork for it.
It's one of the, like, when you get a DUI. Now, there's some guys, they're DUI hounds because they also want to be traffic cops. I mean, they want to pull over the soccer mom and give her a ticket, and they're the traffic people. That's what they want to do. Me, I wasn't a whole big ticket.
You're not a bully.
I wasn't a ticket guy so much because I'm like, again, as a cop at 46, like, in my 20s, I drove around with expired registration. Like, I could be like, hey, you need to fix this.
We did on accident last year.
Right. I mean, that's something to be fixed. So the DUI part is, it's the most litigated charge you can file.
So it's like annoying.
So it's like there's lawyers
People
that this is their thing, that they are going to, like, this is going to court. This is going to get fought.
Yeah.
But with that other part of that, they're coming in to assault somebody. So a DUI that gets pulled over before anything bad happens. Good on us, because that's preemptive, right? Something could have happened. Something bad could have happened. Mm-hmm. Okay, but we got that. You drinking, coming to the ER and punching a nurse in the face, something bad did happen.
Okay.
You see the difference? Like,
yeah.
No, we should still prosecute DUIs and all that. I'm not saying anything that we shouldn't do that, but something could have happened, but we got them.
Yeah.
Something did happen. Now what are we doing?
Yeah.
something did happen.
So answer me this, because I think that I had said this a couple of times to my staff, is that when police officers come in and they don't really think that the officers are taking them seriously. Just like you come in, it depends on the nurse. Sometimes it depends on the officer and what point of their shift they're in or what they experienced earlier to how serious or how much like importance they'll put on this. But I try to like remind them, if you are a cop and you were assaulted, this patient is going to jail when appropriate. They're going to have cops sitting on that patient to take them as soon as they're medically cleared. But if this happens to a nurse, more than half the time, we still have to be the nurse for that patient.
Sure.
And then the officer's like, well, we don't have the bodies to sit on this patient and we're just going to long form them, or we'll have to follow up on a different time frame. And it's like, we're still stuck with this person that violated our rights and assaulted me. And it's like I've said before, staying in a toxic relationship. I can do stuff as a charge nurse and rearrange assignments so maybe that same nurse doesn't need to go in there. But we still have to physically be caring for somebody that wronged my friend.
Sure.
And that it's like a mental trip. It's not healthy. But we feel like we can't do anything about it because, again, if this happened to an officer, we feel that your guys' level of protection or seriousness on it is held to a different standard than ours.
And I wished I could disagree because, I mean, I know that guy's going to jail at some point.
Yeah.
Even if he gets out after
but
initial
where's
appearance.
our comfort in that they'll even be punished?
So with that is you can, it's like anything. Do you know how the system kind of works, right?
No.
In the sense of
we don't.
What are we doing here about this? Like asking him, like, and ask what's the plan right now? And if they're like, we'll submit on it. Okay, you're gonna submit on it. Can I please have my
Incident
call number,
call back? Yeah.
Or if they're like, we don't have the bodies on that, saying, I understand. I understand. We've already gorked him. Whatever the case is, you know who he is. How soon am I going to hear from somebody on this? Mm-hmm. Right?
If they weren't gorked or anything, could we, like, I know there's sometimes that kind of HIPAA confusion on if the patient is then discharged, can I let the police know?
So how soon is he getting discharged?
Sometimes we don't know, but at the time of discharge, like there's that legal question, am I even allowed to call PD to come and get them?
So because, I mean, you can call the cops for anything. You can call.
But am I violating their?
So the HIPAA, you'd have to ask on HIPAA, like.
Yeah.
And where's that call going to get placed? Like, hey, this dude earlier in the day where this happened, they say he's getting discharged, and as you're going up, like as you're driving, however far that is away, to go hopefully maybe find somebody. I don't know. Versus like this happened, we're clearing him. He's done.
Ready to be taken right now.
I'll be honest, at the very least, with all that other stuff done, I have a class 1 misdemeanor at the very least, which is an arrestable offense.
Yeah.
So take a ride with me. We're going to jail. But calling after they've been discharged, I don't. Again, love for a lawyer to weigh in, or even another officer. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I've never had that situation. I've never had that kind of happen.
Okay. Now, sorry, I feel like I'm jumping around here, but back to when they get taken to jail.
Okay.
What happens?
So they go to jail, and I worked for the county jail here for a little bit. They go to jail. The officer are going to wait a really long time because they're always short-staffed and always short-staffed of nurses. And then you're going to finally get your guy through, and then they're going to photograph him. They're going to do prints, and then he's going to go to initial appearance court, IA court. That's when he's going to go stand in front of the judge. They're going to read the charges. She's going to be, prior to that, if they qualify for pretrial release, they're going to go to pretrial, they'll sit down to pretrial release. They have criteria that says, hey, that we trust this person will show up to court, so we're going to let them out. With kind of like the citation in lieu of detention, like with their promise to appear at their court date, right?
Okay.
Or the judge is going to say, no, I'm setting a bail or I'm setting bond amount. And then it'll either be secured or cash only. And then either they'll go wait in jail for their hearing, or they've been released, they made bond, and then they
Now, do they get that money back?
Bail? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh.
Like if you go to court, like it all gets done. I just said yeah, like I was really confident, right? I was like, oh yeah, like absolutely.
I was like, shoot.
Oh yeah, plus interest. No, as I say that, I would assume so, because it's just a secured deposit promising your appearance. And if you appeared,
okay. Then you get it back.
yeah, I mean, that's like all the great like TV shows about
I guess,
bounty
yeah,
hunters.
I just
like
had
the
no
Fall
idea.
Guy.
I was like, wow, this state must make a lot of money. And
Yeah,
so it makes sense that
Fall Guy.
it's just kind of like a monetary promise.
Well, yeah, I mean, and if you have, so cash only, that one's going to be rough. When it's 100,000 cash only, that means $100,000 in cash. The secured bond, I believe, is going to be like your 10%. So your family's going to go to a bail bondsman and like put up their house or their car with that incentive to make sure they show up, which is why skip tracers, also known as bounty hunters, make good money too when they go and find these people.
So if they don't show up after the bond is placed or the cash is given,
They'll
then
get a warrant. So there'll be a
the
warrant.
city gets to keep it?
So they could forfeit the bond. Yeah.
Okay.
And they'll have a warrant issued for their arrest.
Okay.
Now you'll have some counties are pretty devious. Is your bond might be $100 out of Pensacola, Florida, right? With that court system saying we want this guy, and so when we pick him up, and the courts or whoever or their dispatch whoever calls and says, you know, do you guys want him? And they say we want him. So out of state, you're 90 days, and after 90 days, if they don't come and get you, you get released. So that's all that like court system is doing is they're like, well, every 90 days he's going to go sit in jail till he comes back and pays his $100. It's kind of crazy, right? Mm-hmm. I think with this, as a layperson, as a citizen, there's a lot of emphasis on police conduct. Okay, there's a couple I can give you. And go, yeah, there's very, very little attention paid to prosecutorial conduct and judicial conduct. Not a whole lot of attention paid there.
Yeah. They kind of just get to do what
let me ask you, like doctors, like if doctors do something wrong, who's going to review them? Who's going to look at it? Who's going to sit down?
Board or
they're going to get peer reviewed, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be other doctors that look at it, right?
Yeah.
So for us, we were talking about, or a lot of jurisdictions have like civilian review boards that look at our police conduct.
Okay.
Good and bad. If you're going to do judicial review, well, who's going to look at you? Your peers, right? Is my understanding. Somebody can maybe comment
doing
different.
The same thing that they're doing, most
or
likely.
Might find yourself in the same situation. Do you really want to be the guy that now you're in the same situation as the previous person and you came down hard? What's going to happen to you? I don't know. That's a guess.
Yeah. But that could be where part of this system is failing us, is that even if there is a review of people, it's almost eye-opening probably to these people. Oh, well, they got away with doing this.
You know,
and you're letting so many things slip through the cracks. Now there's this whole canyon of things that are just like, oh, well, no one did anything about me not doing this, and I can pass this off to city court and nothing gets happened, and nurses aren't going to pay lawyers because we barely scrape by half the time as it is.
And there wouldn't be a lawyer to hire unless you were going to civilly sue, right? Yeah. Because the prosecutor's supposed to be your lawyer. It's the people's lawyer.
Okay.
They represent the state. We as citizens make up the state. So I don't know. It's just, like I said, that's just some thoughts on why the judicial or you know, the prosecutorial stuff, it just, I don't know. I wished I knew.
I can try to find somebody or
it seems like
some answers. I feel that there's a lot of like unknown and inconsistencies.
Yeah. Like, why does this happen? Like,
and or what could we do better in giving the report or following up? Like, why is this not an established thing where nurses feel like they're protected to be able to submit these charges? Like, why is there such this drastic number of things that are just dropped and not taken anywhere? Well, when we're supposed to have this mentality that we are protected at the level of like a felony assault if something like that happens to us. But it doesn't go there.
It's not me saying that. It's the legislature. They wrote the book. I just read it.
The paper says it, but nothing happens.
So then what happens when you start FOIA requesting? Well, like your own case, once you can request your case and see what notes were made and what the report was. As for like what the county did with it, I'm guessing you could FOIA request that to see who wrote what, when, and where, and why.
For why things were dropped.
Why? Again, I go back to, you guys like burned down the View over a doctor's stethoscope.
Yeah.
Like there's
I'm
power.
ready to do that with this system. I just don't know how.
There's power.
Yeah.
It's educating police officers. I would say that, because I've had to explain this charge more than once to fellow officers, to supervisors. So it's officers understanding, because we get like into a thing where we go, okay, so it's assault. Okay, well, because if you read ag assault, that 1204, it talks about like serious disfigurement, like a weapon was used, like that we kind of recognize, oh, okay, it's going to be aggravated assault because look, broken nose, blah, blah, blah. But we're real good with like the simple assault, like, oh, they, got slapped.
Yeah.
No permanent physical injury. Okay, so it's going to be this, 1203, it's going to be this misdemeanor, because a lot of people don't read down into that ag assault and realize, oh, wait.
But because it was a healthcare
because
worker.
it fits this definition of occupations.
Yeah.
We actually can charge it this way.
Okay.
Now, again, though, you also have officer discretion, and everybody hates officer discretion until they get pulled over.
You
Right?
think so? Yeah.
Everybody, when I say officer discretion, they're like, oh, I don't even know why they can do that. Because when I pulled you over, ma'am, and you had your nursing ID and, in nursing week, so good on you. It's nurse week, right?
Yeah. Happy Nurses Week.
Happy Nurses Week. And you identify yourself as a nurse, and I tell you stop signs aren't suggestions. You love officer discretion.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, please.
There's very few incidents in Arizona where we shall arrest. That are shall arrest. Now, there are common sense situations, like say you're in the East Valley and you have an obvious murder and you have two people there, you should probably arrest them. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to like the assault stuff, we do have discretion as whether or not we take them.
Yeah.
We do. And
That's
usually
fair.
an educated discretion is I've called my boss. Right?
Yeah. Because then you can't really say it was just your opinion. You can kind of get
also,
approval.
Yeah. And it's also keeping the understanding I can put handcuffs on and I can also take handcuffs off.
Yeah.
So if I put handcuffs on that person because they're ready to be discharged, and I talk to my boss and he says, hey, we need to do something different, well, guess what? Those handcuffs can come back off.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair. Well, I think that we've brought up quite a few good points that have actually got my brain like spinning a little bit more. But now I would feel more confident in helping educate my listeners and my staff on, okay, well, this is kind of what we can anticipate. Like that obviously file, get the police there. Step one.
I
Get
can
the
identify who it
report
was
number.
and I desire to aid in prosecution.
Yes, you want to be involved to the highest capacity. Get the report number. Follow up with phone calls. Show up to court if you're invited, if it even goes there, and asks questions. And apparently there's an audit you can pull after everything
They're
is
FOIA
closed.
requests. So
FOIA.
Freedom of Information Act.
Oh, okay. So that's what that means.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's things that we can do to maybe get more information on why so many of our cases are just dismissed or dropped down.
So here's what I would say is, to me, common sense would be if I was an administrator in a police agency, like I was a higher up, or I'm high up in the county attorney's office, and all of a sudden I have 200 FOIA requests come in for the same type of crime, that would get me thinking, but that's just me. That would get me thinking of, why is there so many Freedom of Information Act requests for this specific type of crime?
Like something stirring.
Dr.
Okay,
Stethoscopes.
The View, whenever you want to have me on.
Dr. Stethoscopes. Y'all nearly burned down the country over Dr. Stethoscopes.
Yeah.
I would hope that there would be the same passion over this.
Done.
Cool.
It is my passion, obviously.
Good
so
deal.
I got some plans and ideas. I got to brainstorm a little bit more, but thank you so much for being
letting me
on
be here
and for your
just ramble
educating,
along.
because again, they don't teach us this stuff in nursing school. And then thank you for listening. I know it was a long episode. I hope you guys made it through. Please like, subscribe, share, follow. If you know a district attorney, invite them on. Let's talk. That's what this is for, is just to try to smooth out the process, let nurses feel protected, and let us know that we are safely allowed to talk about these stories because it is actual experiences, and let's do something about it. Thank you. See you next week.